And the recording has started.
Elizabeth, I'll hand it to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Henneke. I'm the Executive Director of the Lone Star Justice Alliance, and we partner quite closely with both Hearts to Heal and Measure on the Innocence Initiative, and we were so excited when they invited us to come talk to you all about evidence-based practices to work with girls and girls of color. So we are going to give you a little bit of our lessons learned. Our organization provides an alternative to incarceration program for 17 to 24-year-olds in both Williamson County and Dallas. And so today we'll be talking to you a little bit about the types of girls you might encounter, what trauma looks like, how it shows up, and then be working on that. So again, my name is Elizabeth Henneke. I have been an attorney for about 15 years and have been working with girls in the juvenile justice system almost exclusively for the last 12. So that's me. Amy, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Amy Lopez. I'm based in Washington, D.C., but I am the Director of Programs for LSJA. So I have a long career in public education and then in correctional education, both with juveniles and with adults. So I'll be talking to you a little bit today about positive behavioral supports and trauma-informed care. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Angel Carroll, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for Lone Star Justice Alliance. I work with their transformative justice programs. So I have lived experience in the justice system and the foster care system. I'm super excited for all the great work that you all will be doing for the Girl Squad, mainly because I didn't have someone like you all when I was in the system until kind of the end of my adolescence. I was in 12 different foster homes my first year, moving across the state, in and out of the justice system. And honestly, I would say that the system failed me more times than they actually helped. When I was about 16, though, I was lucky enough to be assigned a lawyer ad litem who happened to be an African-American woman. And that was the first time that I saw someone that looked like me in the system and who really cared, who listened to me, who I felt like I could trust, and I can honestly be myself and know that I wasn't going to be judged. And her advocacy work with me really changed the trajectory of my life because she was there to advocate for me in the court. She was able to identify my trauma and my behavior. And by looking at my behavior and understanding my trauma and what triggered me, she was able to advocate for me in the court system. So when I was 16, I was at school. I was acting up. A resource officer came from behind and grabbed me. Didn't know who it was. All I knew was that there was large hands on my back, and I went into fight or flight mode. And so I hit him, and I was arrested, and I was facing serious time for assault against a public servant. Because of my trauma, though, she was able to advocate to the court saying that I didn't just assault a cop because I had this utter disdain for authority, but because there was some real trauma and some real things that were going on in my life that hadn't been addressed. And I was able to get the help that I needed. And unfortunately, there are a lot of girls in the system that don't have someone to advocate for them. And again, I'm super excited for the great work that you all will be able to do with the Girl Squad. I think with cultural and just competence when it comes to trauma-informed care and motivational interviewing, which you all will learn today, you all also will have the ability to change young girls' lives. So I thank you all for being here. And with that, I'll pass it over to Elizabeth.
I muted. There we go. Before we got started really on the skill set, I thought it would be helpful to identify some sort of the types of clients that I've had in my career, representing girls that are involved in the juvenile or the child welfare system, so that you have a better understanding of what you may encounter. And so I'm going to tell you just 3 stories. I'm a storyteller. That's what lawyers do, right? So the first story is a young woman named Lacey. I am giving you pseudonyms, but Lacey, who came to work with me as a fighter. She showed up every day antagonistic and pushing and challenging. And she was smart as the Dickens. And so when she came after you with her words, they slashed every single part of your soul, because she saw into your soul. She knew what was going to push you, and she could reach in and cut you to pieces um, faster than anybody you've ever seen. And so she had just a history of intensive discipline. And so she had been rejected from every program. She'd been in a girls' mentoring program. She'd been rejected. She'd been in school, been rejected. And people just saw her as somebody who was fighting everyone. And over the time representing her, I came to recognize that she was actually a victim of human trafficking. She'd been sold at the age of 3 into human trafficking by her mother and grandfather. And from that point, she had entered into the child welfare system and had started to push away every single person in her life, because she just had a really difficult time wanting you to prove yourself to her and to earn her respect. And so, we were able to work through that by me just not giving up on her. And so you're going to have girls that come to you who are going to push you, and what they're just looking for is for you to stick with it. And so this is one of the ways that you may encounter somebody, is the girl who dresses you down, rejects everything you stand for. And that's one way that trauma can show up. And then you'll know to ask more questions. Angel, do you mind going to the next slide? And then the opposite is the girl who lives in the shadows. So the other way that you may find somebody who shows up with trauma is a mentee who may come to you either meek or not show up. She may never answer your phone calls. She may not engage with you, and she may really just avoid everything there is to do at the program. And this often is also another indicator of trauma, someone who is showing up because they've been, told to by a strong person in their life. Like, all the girls you're working with is already, they've got somebody. That's how they ended up making it through your application process. But she may be trying to avoid all interaction. And that often can also be a sign of trauma that you want to look out for, because the girls who shrink to the shadow and who avoid any sort of attention can often be the ones that are also struggling and just need somebody to really draw out with them. And so we're going to give you the skill set that you need to actually draw people out of the shadow, or get them to take off their boxing gloves so that you can work with them more effectively. One of the things that we're going to talk to you a little bit about is how to identify triggers. And so I've put up here an orange box. And the reason is that one of my clients was somebody who had been involved in a very, very serious crime, and actually killed a man who delivered a pizza. And no one could identify why someone without a record suddenly had lashed out and pretty violently killed a man who delivered a pizza. I started representing her. She'd been in prison for about 25 years. And we started really breaking down, and I started asking her questions about the event that had happened. And every single time she kept drawing back to, he had an orange shirt on, he had an orange shirt on. And it was such a specific detail to remember so long after the offense that I actually pulled her case file and I looked, and in fact, he was wearing an orange shirt. And so I asked her, did you see the autopsy reports? Did you, why is it that that detail stuck out to you? And she started to think about it. And ultimately, what we figured out with our therapist was that she had actually been the subject of sexual assault as a child. And the light that existed over the bed while she was sexually assaulted was orange, and she had actually fixated on that. And we were able to actually go back and find photos from when she was growing up and verify that, in fact, the light over her bed when she was growing up was orange. And it suddenly, while it didn't excuse what had happened, it just made a lot more sense what had happened, which is that like this man showed up at a very difficult time wearing an orange color, and it really triggered her, and it really pushed her back into the place of unresolved trauma. But the reason that we were able to discover that about her, or Lisi's story, or really to work with our different clients, is because we asked questions. And so one of the things that we think anybody who works with kids should do, I think we can go to the next slide, Angel, is really just to ask questions and to empower people to make choices in their lives. And so motivational interviewing, which could literally last 3 days, and I'm going to give it to you in 10 minutes, is about asking folks about their lives in a way that allows them the opportunity to, you can just stay there, and it allows folks the opportunity to give you information. And so the first thing that you're going to do whenever you work with girls is just listen as much as you can and give them the opportunity through open-ended questions to tell you about their lives. So I want to stop here and give everybody an ability. I want to talk a little bit about open-ended questions. So if you can all feel free to unmute, and I'm going to ask questions. So can you take us out of the slideshow for a minute? Okay. So I want to stop and just talk about what does an open-ended question look like? So if you are approaching a young woman who is 14 years old, and let's take the Lisi story, and she is just really aggressively challenging you on anything, what questions might you ask her to sort of understand what's going on in her life?
This is Rhonda Walton. I would ask her what was her high for the day? Like, what was the best thing that happened today?
I think that's great. I think it's great. And why would you ask her that question?
Because then she would have to redirect her thought process because she's mad or angry or whatever, and that would just throw her off.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And so what if she says to you, Rhonda, I'm going to push you a little bit. So what if she says to you, I didn't have any highlights. My day was people like you who were coming to me and trying to make me answer questions in order to push me to think through things.
So you don't think that's a high? Me coming, I wanted to see you.
So I think that is exactly how I would answer. One of the things motivational interviewing does is to say that sometimes you don't want to confront people. That in fact, what you want to do is say to her, wow, that sounds really tough. What is it about that you don't like? And how can I meet you in a way that would be better, right? So one of the things that we want to try to do is get them to talk, even if it's uncomfortable to hear.
Okay.
And let me tell you, Ms. Walton, that's exactly how I would have answered. So, but one of the things is that you want to get people to talk even when it's uncomfortable to hear. And sometimes the way you're going to get them talking and understand their triggers is just to let them talk about the things that anger them and make them uncomfortable. And listening to those things, listening to them complain about it, will give them the opportunity and give you the opportunity to sort of understand, like, what is the genesis that's motivating them, and really understand it. And so hearing her say, I've had to deal with people like you. Wow, I'm really sorry that you're having to do that. What is it people like I do that you don't like? Right. And really giving her a chance to say that. And that shows up to her as non-confrontational. You really do want to hear, and you're going to listen, even if it's an uncomfortable response. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So
Okay.
just kind of redirect it.
That's right. Like just keep the conversation going, right? You're just going to keep
Okay.
hearing her, right? Um, what everybody else. So what other things might you ask? What might you ask if she says, you know, she comes in and you want to say, hello, how's your day going? What would be your follow-up? Or some open-ended
If
questions?
Me personally, if
what
she,
was
this
it?
is the, oh,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Alyssa. We'll let you start.
Oh, what are you asking exactly? Like what we
What
would,
what questions would you ask to start a conversation where people might reveal what's going on in their lives?
well, I have a 4-year-old baby brother, and a lot of times when he's upset and crying, I just kind of ask him like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, why are you so upset? And he'll be like, oh, you hurt my feelings. And I'm like, well, what did I do to hurt your feelings? What can I do, next time not to make you so upset? And, just what can I do to help you out with your
Yeah,
emotions right now?
I think that's great. Victoria, you were going to say something?
Sorry, yes, I was getting off mute. What I've done in my prior experience, I am a counselor. I just ask, basically when I'm trying to work with a client, I actually try to build a rapport. I don't try to just go in trying to ask all kind of questions. I'm trying to understand them so they can understand me, learn their personality, and I just don't kind of go in and dreading asking questions. And if she told me, like with the first person, if she tells me, well, hey, I'm having a bad day because of people like you, I'll probably say, tell me more. Versus asking a question that leads to a yes or no where she's going to shut down. Something that's going to keep interacting with her and just say, tell me more or something like that nature.
Yeah, I think that's right. Exactly. The tell me more or tell me more about that. Wow. That sounds, I want to understand more. How can you explain to me why that is? Right. I think that's perfect. One thing I want to draw out, Victoria, that you said, which I didn't cover, which I think is really important, again, because motivational interviewing could be 3 days. But one thing you said that I want to pull out for everybody is just really building the rapport and starting to just let people talk. And not rushing the process. We always say one of our big tenets in our program is trust the process. And so not rushing it and giving people an opportunity just to talk about what they want to talk, especially in the beginning. And that kind of gets to our next section, which Amy's going to talk to you about, which is how do you in fact do that, right? So ask an open-ended question. Don't assume you know the answer and just give them an opportunity to talk. It's great.
I have a question or more of a statement. One thing that I feel like I've learned is in order for someone to be vulnerable with you, you have to be vulnerable with them. So would it benefit you kind of sharing maybe a similar experience that you had to kind of get that conversation going?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And when I talk to, when I'm teaching law students, I talk about this all the time, which is an information exchange, but being careful to not try to equate your situation to theirs, because especially coming from an adult who maybe is more successful, that can sometimes feel like it can sometimes be an overshare. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
So, and this is like a fine line, and it's one of those things you'll have to negotiate your relationship with. But if, if Angel comes to me and says, hey, I'm really struggling because, I was in the child welfare system and I lost my mom when I was 8. That's not what happened. I lost my mom when I was 8. She passed away. And I say, wow, I know exactly how you feel about that because my dad died last week. Right. And
Yeah.
how I'm feeling. Now we're like focused now on what happened to me and not on what happened to her. And so I think what you can say is, wow, that sounds really challenging. Tell me more, and have her really talk about it. And then say, what has helped me in the past is to do the following. And then that's more reflective listening, and that you've heard what she has to say. And then you're reflecting on what she's told you, and you're giving her skills from your own experience. And that can feel really affirming, right?
Okay.
And that can
Yes.
build trust. But what you don't want to do is cut her off and tell your story. Does that
Yeah,
make
of course.
sense?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and honestly, that's how we interact as people. A lot of times is like, you tell me this and I tell you this. And there's like, we both get something out of the relationship and the conversation. But when you're mentoring, you really want to make this like a one-way street where they're really getting everything from you. And they are feeling like they're empowered, and you're giving back skill sets and affirmation. So a lot of
Okay.
people just want to be affirming what they're saying. Because as you all know, what's the worst thing that can happen? It's what happened to Angel, right? Where she was telling people what was going on and no one was listening, right? Being heard is like 90% of the battle. And then it goes back to what Victoria said and what Ms. Walton both said, which was, and then really developing the relationship, right? Like, I'm here now, right? But it's step one is listening and being heard.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yes, it does.
I will say one thing that I do, just a trick of the trade that I've learned over the years, is I'll share insignificant information. And so that can feel like an information exchange, but it doesn't put the weight onto the girl. So for instance, if she says my mom died, I could say, wow, that's really challenging. And then maybe later in the conversation, I share something about, I don't know, something personal about myself. I've really had a hard time with, a week or whatever. Sometimes not in that moment when they're telling about a traumatic event, but later I will share information about my own personal life that is sort of neutral and doesn't require putting my trauma onto them, but does feel like I'm sharing authentically of myself. Does that make sense? And so you want to share authentically of yourself, but in a way that is not burdening the girl who's already probably got a lot to deal with.
Okay, that sounds good. I can do that.
Perfect. All right. There's lots more where you're going to have our contact information. You can always follow up with us. Although it sounds like you've got some experts on your team as well. But I'm going to hand this over to Amy to talk a little bit more about what trauma looks like.
All right, let's talk a little bit about trauma-informed care. I loved that Victoria, Ms. Walton, you talked about building rapport, because that is exactly what we want to do when we're working with people who have experienced trauma. We call that trust-based relational intervention, or TBRI. And so it's important to understand that children, youth, and emerging adults who've experienced foster care, any sort of residential care, or that have been justice involved, very often experience complex developmental trauma, demonstrating an interactive set of psychological and behavioral issues. And TBRI is an evidence and research-based therapeutic model for preparing caregivers to provide effective support and treatment for at-risk youth, including emerging adults who you'll be working with. All right, Miss Angel. So what does trauma look like? First of all, you guys may have heard this term before, but adverse childhood experiences, or sometimes we call them ACE or ACEs. We have assessments that can look at that, and very frequently we see clinicians and psychologists who will score a person on the number of adverse childhood experiences that they've had, and then sort of base therapy and treatment on that. But ACEs can run the gamut of abuse, and that could include physical, mental, emotional, or sexual abuse. It also includes neglect, which could also be emotional or physical, or family dysfunction, which includes mental illness in the family, divorce, incarceration, where a child has at least one parent who's absent because of incarceration. But not all traumas happen in childhood. It's just that a lot of childhood trauma never really gets treated, or addressed, mainly because as children, we don't know how. Well, and to be honest, as adults, we don't always know how, but children particularly don't know how. They don't know how to ask for help, or adults either ignore the signs of this or just put down their behavior as being a bad kid instead of addressing this. But we also have, and you guys have heard this, right? PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's an anxiety disorder that develops in relation to an event that creates a psychological trauma in response to an actual or a threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violation. And the exposure may involve directly experiencing the event. It could be that the person witnessed the event, that they learned of an actual or a threatened death of a close family member or a friend, or they repeated firsthand extreme exposure to the details of the event. In other words, everyone around them just keeps talking about it, so they just keep reliving a traumatic event. Right, Angel? So what are some manifestations of trauma? Some of the ways that this manifests itself may be alcoholism and alcohol abuse, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, coronary heart disease, depression, drug abuse and illicit drug use, fetal death, intimate partner violence, liver disease, mental health problems, obesity, sexual behavioral problems, smoking, unintended pregnancies, violence, workplace problems. These are all things that can happen because people have unaddressed trauma. So there are 3 factors that should be included in any program designed to treat complex trauma. And we're going to talk about these in the sense of tools that you all can use with your mentees. The first is that we have to develop safety. And I love that you guys were talking about this too, right? Building trust, having a safe place to come listen to. So this is sort of Maslow's lowest level of needs, where that theory says that until somebody's physical needs are met, they're not hungry, they don't feel like they're in danger, they have a place to live. In other words, it's a safe place. It's hard to meet other needs. And then the second is the promotion of healing relationships. And the last is teaching of self-management and coping skills. Okay, Angel. So these elements parallel 3 evidence-based principles of TBRI, and these were actually developed at TCU's Institute of Child Development. And the first one they just call empowerment. And so this is where we make attention to the participants' physical needs. So your mentees' needs, you know, if you're seeing some aberrant behavior or other things that are happening that you're not sure of, are they living in a safe place? Do they have enough to eat? Do they have access to health care that they need? All the things that we all take for granted every day as those basic physical needs, are those being met? The second element is connection, which is an attachment to attention to attachment needs. And this is where we really work with people to help them learn how to build healthy relationships. So can they maintain relationships, and do they sustain relationships? And what are those relationships? Are that those relationships that cause more trauma, or are they healthy relationships? And the third element is correction, which is where we pay attention to behavioral needs. And then always we're going to talk about this more, but we look at behavior as sometimes it may be a manifestation of trauma. So why are they behaving this way? What's the payoff for this behavior? And most importantly, how can we help teach better behavior or different skills to help people get better outcomes? So symptoms to look out for trauma, negative alterations in cognition and mood. And this just means maybe they have persistent negative beliefs. They have lasting or distorted feelings such as anger, guilt, or shame. They feel numb or isolated, and they have a diminished interest in life. And these negative alterations too could be mood swings, right? And changing the way that they think. The second is alterations in arousal, which really just means they may be irritable or aggressive, hypervigilant, they have destructive behavior, and they have difficulty concentrating, and they also have some sort of sleep disturbance. They're either not sleeping enough or they're sleeping all the time. And the third is depression, which is the person you may note is just chronically feeling sad. And they have a loss of interest in activities that they previously enjoyed. And again, sleep issues, feelings of guilt or worthlessness, difficulty thinking or concentrating, or thoughts of death or suicide. And the fourth symptom that psychologists say that we should look for in trauma-informed care is anxiety. And this is an excessive worrying. And I worry a lot, but these are folks that, we all know, we've all experienced anxiety at some point, but these are folks that really have a hard time shaking it. They also have difficulty in controlling that worry. Even when they know it's not reasonable, they still worry. Restlessness, fatigue is a symptom of anxiety, or hyperactivity. It's the total opposite, being on edge and difficulty sleeping. And notice how all of these symptoms sort of can tie back to people's either lack of being able to sleep or just sleeping all the time. So those are really great symptoms to look out for when you're visiting with your mentees. And so I want to just talk really briefly about starting with the foundation of trauma-informed care, because on the left side there is sort of the way traditionally people have a tendency to view the behavior of people who've suffered trauma or have trauma that's never been addressed. So you may think, man, my mentee is sick or ill or just immoral, and this person's got some real problems. And instead, we have to, when we talk about trauma-informed care, look at this person and say, man, this person is hurt and they're suffering, instead of going on the negative or placing that blame and fault on the participant. Also, traditionally we might look at behaviors as negative or criminal, and we think they should just be punished, right? If we could just get enough punishment, that'll fix it. And when we talk about people through a trauma-informed care lens, instead we say, these behaviors, even though they may seem negative to the general population, those are survival skills, and they've developed through trauma, and they may be maladaptive to normal society. So it may not be the way you and I would do it, but for them, in their head and in their experience, it's the way that they survive. Like Angel's story, you put your hands on me, I'm going to put my hands back, because that's how I know how to survive. So we need to start to really look at behaviors in a different way. And the last one I thought was interesting, one more, is that people frequently say, they could just change if they just wanted to. If they just tried hard enough, they could change. And instead, we really need to look at folks who've suffered trauma and have unaddressed trauma, that they need support, trust, and appropriate models, instead of saying, suck it up. All right, Angel.
And if I can add one little piece, if I may, I think oftentimes during my adolescence, people saw me as being manipulative. And during that time, for me, that was the only way that I can get people to listen. And then that was the way that I could get those resources that I needed, because did I not act that way, I would have failed in some capacity. So I think just realizing that some of those attributes and traits that you give people, typically there's a trauma behind that.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So I work a lot of hours with people who are incarcerated, and people who work in corrections will always say, well, he's a manipulator, or they'll have whole training sessions on being manipulated by an inmate. And I always just say, when you have suffered that much trauma and you are in survival mode in an carceral space, and you're incarcerated, if you weren't manipulated before you went in, you better learn it really quick, because that's the only way you get what you need. But just normal society looks at that like it's negative behavior. We have to learn to say, hey, they're doing the best they can with what they have and what they know. And then it's our job to sort of help to listen and to help teach better management skills. All right.
I think the manipulative was one. I want to throw in another one, which is the lying. You'll often have people say, he lied to me. And that can be really tough in a mentor-mentee relationship, because you think, wow, I've spent all of this volunteer time and I've worked with you and I've given so much of myself, and then you lie to me. And I think two things can come from that. One, which is they're pushing you because they're testing to see if you'll be there. This is part of trust building. And then two, this really is a skill set that people learn, right? When their parents come home and say, did you go to school today? And they didn't because of whatever reason, they may lie in order to avoid a beating or lie in order to be able to go to school. And so sometimes recognizing that lying is not an assault or a rejection of the trust that you've extended to them, but rather just a survival skill that they have learned in order to survive. And so to back to Amy's point of like, it's our job to like recognize that for what it is and then give them an opportunity to redirect into a healthier approach to responding.
That's really great. And lying is a really great survival skill in some environments. So we just got to teach them what that now they don't have to. So symptoms, I would say for these are not symptoms. These are actually tools that you can use. Just you can kind of put them in your back pocket and be thinking about them. First of all, just remember that recovery, grieving, and growth takes place over a period of time. So providing hope is something that you can definitely do as a mentor, and to give them hope that long-term goals are attainable and worth working toward. And it's an important element to establish with your mentee. And so are they going to experience setbacks? Absolutely. When we all experience setbacks, we just may have more resiliency in being able to overcome those. So it's really important to give hope, to say, yeah, I know you have a setback right now, but it's not keeping you from your long-term goal. This is just a little hurdle, or maybe a big hurdle, but you still got your long-term goal out there, and we can get to it. Man, one of the best tools that you can have is to be a good listener. And I heard all of you, Alyssa, Miss Walton, Victoria, you all mentioned that. It's just to be a good listener and to smile and just keep a positive outlook. Be kind, compassionate, and empathetic. And again, I mean, most of the time when you're talking about trauma-informed care, we do less talking about ourselves and more listening about what our mentee is saying to us. And we'll get more out of that than if we tell our own stories over and over and over. And to become trauma-informed. And then I think we have another slide with some tools, Angel. Invite conversation while remaining calm. I would give a great tool is to never force somebody to talk. Particularly, don't force them to talk about their trauma. They'll tell you or they won't, but just invite conversation, and then you'll probably get to the crux of what's going on. Also, always allow room for silence, and also allow room for the other person to walk away, because when they're telling their story, or if something is a trigger, you may not even know what it is. Like, it's an orange shirt, you don't know it's an orange shirt. So allow the person the ability to walk away and take some time if they need to. Allow expression of emotion. One of the things that we do when we teach cognitive behavioral therapy to others is that we always create this safe space to say, look, in general, you can't go around using curse words and, telling somebody to F off or whatever. But when we're having a conversation, and if I ask you, how did you feel about that? Or what were you thinking? If the person says, man, I just wanted to say F off, then you don't say, hey, don't use that word. I mean, that was a legitimate, authentic thought that they have. And so you accept that. You might say later, it's not really great to say it out loud to other people, but saying it in your head, totally get it, right? But don't judge them when they say, this was the thought I had. And if it's even it's an angry expression of emotion. And I loved a while ago when Alyssa said, I just always say, how can I help you, or what do you need? Alyssa, so spot on. It's always the last thing I say to everybody I'm working with, whether they have trauma or not. But trauma, people who have experienced trauma and have never had it addressed, they may also have never had anybody to say, what do you need? How can I help you? So that's always a great thing to ask. Another tool you can use is sometimes let it go. And Elizabeth brought this up, that, something happens, that you'll see the next one is don't take it personally. it's probably not about you at all. And then sometimes if you see somebody's on the edge of something and they want to tell you and then they just don't quite get there, then you can let that pass. Maybe they'll come back to you. Just sometimes know when to let it go. Don't take it personally, and always report any concerning behavior or conversations that you have to the Transformative Justice Team, LSJA, to their counselor if you know their counselor. So for instance, anytime a mentee tells you they're having suicidal thoughts or they think about death a lot, that's an important thing. Don't judge them at that time. Just listen, maybe ask them if they've talked to their counselor, but always report that. Just because it's a concern and there may be issues you don't know about, and that way you can get help with that, because you are not a clinical psychologist, so you don't want to take that role on. And the last one, I'm just going to say, this was not in any psychological journal, but this is my personal experience, is leave your savior complexes at the door, because we're not here to save people. We're only here to open doors and give them opportunities to save themselves. So sometimes we do way more harm when we think we're going to rush in and save somebody than if we write them off. So just remember to keep that line. All right, Miss Angel. And then I just wanted to leave you with this quote by Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "You do what you can with what you have where you are," and that's exactly where your mentees are. So meet them there, and we're going to help them to get to the next place.
Should we pause for a second? Does anybody have any questions before we move on to the next section? Okay.
So we're going to move into a PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Support section. Amy's going to start off with the theory, and then I'll go in with what that looks like in practice and how we're using that at our RISE program.
Okay, so PBI stands for Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. And this was actually started as in a school setting and has moved on beyond that. Traditionally, young adults who are justice involved are treated as behavioral problems. So schools and justice and criminal justice agencies really look at behavior modification, and it's designed to identify negative behaviors and implement strategies to reduce all those deficits, get rid of all these negative behaviors. And PBIS is a framework that really is the very opposite. So our goal when we're working with with your mentees and our participants is to identify the strengths that they have, to teach them new behaviors, to incentivize the use of those behaviors, and then to provide opportunities to practice, and then we celebrate when they're successful. So instead of focusing on punishment and what's not working, we really focus on what works, and then we build on that, and we celebrate it. So PBIS is really a three-tiered framework, and I'm just going to run through this really quickly. The bottom line are interventions that we provide for everybody in a transformative justice program. And then tier 2 are really targeted. On that bottom tier, really what PBIS, the theory says, is that when you put in rules and you offer incentives and you do all of these program-wide kinds of work with behavioral change, 80 to 85% of all participants are going to fall in line. But then there's a tier 2. It's about 10 to 15% of the population, and they just need targeted intervention. So, I mean, they do what they need to most of the time, but they have their moments where they fall off the wagon, and they may be consistent or persistent behaviors that we really want to address and reteach. And then the top tier is only about 3 to 5% of that population, and they really have to have intensive interventions. And these are the folks that it doesn't seem to matter what we do. When we do the general things that other people respond to, these are the folks that we just see the same persistent behaviors that keep them from success. So we really have to buckle down and individualize the interventions for them.
And Amy, can you go back to the prior slide?
Mm-hmm.
And we just have a question, which is, I think really understanding the difference between focus on the negative behavior, which is the traditional way. And even in Travis County, I think most of y'all's folks are going to be coming from the juvenile justice system. So Travis County is like great and better than most, but you still see just a justice system paradigm in general is going to focus on the negative, right? They're going to get a court case for their negative behavior. Everybody's going to be talking about their negative behavior, every court, every check-in, every juvenile probation, every defense counsel is focusing on all those negative behavioral aspects. And so PBIS is about switching to focus on the strengths someone has. Is that right, Amy?
And the basic foundation of this is that we have to teach people certain behaviors, right? So we all may have grown up with certain social behaviors that our parents modeled for us and that we learned at a young age. And so we've exercised them all the way through our emerging adult years, but we can't assume that everybody knows that. So when we see persistent behaviors that are counterproductive to a person's success, and then we're just like, why does he keep doing that? Well, maybe he keeps doing that because he doesn't know any different. So PBIS is about, and the difference there is that traditionally in schools and in criminal justice system, we would say, he keeps doing X. Whereas PBS says, why does he keep doing X? And how can we help him to do Y? Because X isn't working. So we really need to do Y. So how can we get him to Y? Does that make better sense, Miss Walton?
She said, yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Okay, so PBIS is proactive in that we arrange the environment to promote the development and occurrence of pro-social behavior. So this goes back to what we talked about in trauma-informed care, is that we meet physical needs and we make sure the person has a place to live, and we make sure that they feel safe and that they understand that this is a open environment, and that actually part of that environment is it's okay to make a mistake, because we're going to teach you a better way to do it. We're going to help you to get there. We also implement rules and expectations in the same way, program-wide. So we're very consistent. We are clear about our expectations. We're clear about any consequences, but we're also very clear in that we teach the behaviors and we model the behaviors that we want to see. We observe the environment and our participants, and we're responsive to changes that need to be made. So this is another mistake that happens, I think, when we try to help people to learn new behaviors, is that we just set black and white. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to do. Instead of sometimes looking at particularly people who have trauma that hasn't been addressed, they can't do that right now. That's just not what they can do. So we're going to have to adjust that. And we can get them there, but we're going to have to start back here and move forward. I can't say enough that we teach pro-social behaviors. We don't assume people know how to behave. They know they're supposed to do this. They know that they're not supposed to do that. Sometimes they don't. And also remember, they're in survival mode, and these are learned behaviors, and they've had them, these survival behaviors, they've had them for a long time. So if any of you have had a bad habit and tried to break it, you don't break it because somebody says, you should really break that habit. So remember, we teach, we reteach pro-social behaviors. And as a mentor, you model pro-social behaviors, because that's one of the best ways that human beings learn, is by watching other people that we respect, and then we model that behavior. So those are kinds of the framework. So Angel, do you want to talk about the top 5, or do you want me to do that?
Yeah, I can talk about them. So with our transformative justice program for the RISE program in Georgetown, we have 5 expectations, and these are the same expectations we have system-wide. So I apologize, our Williamson County and our Dallas County programs. And so they're be on time and prepared, trust the process, be honest, respect yourself and others, and be accountable. And I like to approach this with the participants as a I teach, you teach, and then we teach approach. So during our first life skills group, we explain to the participant what we expect of them while they're in the program. And then we also go into positive behaviors that are associated with each. So as you see, being timely, dependable, participating, cooperating. And we just go into what those behaviors look like. And then what I like to do that second weekly group that we do is I ask the participants, what do they mean to you? You've had a week to kind of think about these, how you can incorporate them into life. What do they mean to you? And again, as Amy said, that we're constantly teaching them. And so I really love to have participants come in and teach the group. So we may have one week where, everyone's kind of struggled on what being on time and prepared looks like. So we have a participant that's doing fairly well in modeling that behavior and saying, hey, would you mind teaching the group what successful tools have you used to be successful in this? And not only does it allow the participants to gain that confidence in showing their peers what they're doing, but it also allows them to just connect and to really just help others. And I think it's been really great so far with our transformative justice program on that end. Yeah. And I'll pass this back to Amy.
Okay. So in Tier 1, those are the universal interventions and supports. Then you can teach behaviors one-on-one. In transformative justice, we have life skills classes, we have group sessions, and cognitive behavioral therapy instruction, which is where we try to teach people to think in a different way. So if we can change our thinking, we can change our behavior. Other universal interventions is we use an incentive choice menu that Angel will go into in deeper detail here in a little bit. We use Sparks, where we actually look to see what are our participants really interested in, like what gets them going. And then we try to develop projects and educational experiences and community experiences around those personal sparks. We also have community engagement, which I think, Angel, you're going to talk about later as well, the 20, 50, 80, and capstone projects. So it's just important to remember that when we're talking about all participants with PBIS, that behavioral expectations are defined, they're taught, and they're incentivized universally for all participants. Next is Tier 2 and Tier 3, and these are more individualized. Tier 2 may be small groups, but Tier 3 is most definitely one-on-one, individualized interventions for somebody who's really struggling. So these are for, this is when our team works alongside each one of our participants that are really struggling with persistent behaviors that keep them from being productive. And then some strategies that we use is we do utilize behavioral improvement plans, which is sort of a social contract with the participant and the team to say, look, this is the behavior that we want to replace. So what's the replacement behavior and how are we going to help you get to that? We have accountability reports where they really talk about, I did this thing, I either broke a rule or I hurt somebody's feelings. I did something I really regret, and this is what I was thinking. And this is my attitudes and beliefs that sort of helped me with that thinking. And this is what I was feeling at the time. And then boom, I did this thing, right? And so in the future, how could I change my thinking? What's a new way of thinking? So the next time this happens, and then what's a different behavior I could use? So that's an accountability report. It's just the person thinking through and writing down how they feel. And I think the important thing in accountability reports is this, what are my attitudes and beliefs? So if I believe that if I've been had trauma in my life and I really believe that men are evil, then that's an attitude and belief that colors everything I do. For instance, if I think, teachers are always out to get me, then that's an attitude and belief. There are all kinds of attitudes and beliefs, and sometimes the listening that you do with a mentee will help you get to those attitudes and beliefs and say, hey, what can we do to change that? Because not all teachers are out to get you. Not all men are evil, so on and so forth. Other things we use in Tier 2 and Tier 3 is counseling. We use special projects. We do more frequent group and individual sessions, or maybe we have more frequent check-ins with our participants that are struggling just to see how they're doing on their plan.
And one thing that's great about that is that you guys can do all of that with your mentees, right? So we're talking a lot about transformative justice just because we're giving you the lessons we've learned. But I mean, you really can, for a Lisi type mentee who's really pushing back and say, hey, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how you did this thing, right? If you've already established trust and relationship, so you've moved into a place where you're in a trusting relationship and she may trust you more than she trusts anybody else, then you can start to say, hey, let's talk about that time that you threw your mom into a wall. Like that may be something that happens, right? So like, let's talk about that time when you threw your mom into a wall and let's talk about what that looks like. I'm going to give you a minute just to like write it out. Like sometimes just writing it out and having that moment, or, writing a poem or drawing or some sort of, depending on the age, can really just give that moment. And that is something that you can do once you have that trust, right? So it's not just for programs or clinical, but it's something that you can really employ as a tool.
And so lastly, before Angel talks about specifically tools that we use, is just to remember that positive behavioral and interventions and supports is about incentivizing the behavior we want to see instead of punishing for behaviors we don't want to see. So focus on the good. Even when something bad happens, like a really great way to reframe something is that, let's say somebody did something that they ended up with another offense, or they ended up having to go to the judge. And then they're talking to you about that. And then you could just say, so did you want to go see the judge? Right? And if they say no, then say, then how did you end up there? And then when they talk about how they ended up there, you could say, well, what could you have done differently? It's a way of reframing instead of saying, well, you ended up there again, just to talk about what we want to see. And the other thing is, the more, whatever you focus the most on is what you're going to get the most back. So if you're going to focus on negative behaviors, you're going to get more of them. So, and I will say as a mentor, I'll never forget the power of praise from you, because you're going to be somebody they look up to and respect. And every time you see something good and you praise them, that is a form of reinforcement.
Now we're going to talk about PBIS in practice. So as I mentioned earlier, we have this 5 expectations. For all of our transformative justice locations, we have these posters in every office. It just shows a constant reminder of what we expect from the participants and behavior that we're also going to model to them as well. I also would like to add, as I was mentioning, when we have the participants teach the group, we also have them create their own posters, and it's really just like a school style teaching moment. So they've got the big sticky notepads and they've got their markers and they're writing each expectations and asking the group, like, what does this look like? What does this mean to you? And it's one thing to tell them what we expect from them. It's another to actually hear them like talk it out and give examples. And so that was really cool for me, just to see them brainstorm those ideas on that end. I want to talk about the incentives. So as you can see here, we have our mystery motivator board and then on incentive menus. As participants in the TJ program model positive behavior and they meet program milestones, they're able to choose from the incentive menu. And it's just a various variety of things that they can choose for each phase that they're on. So we have 3 phases, and it's really important to allow them to have that option as they move up through the program, through the phases as well. They're able to put their name on the mystery motivator. So they're able to draw a number out of a hat. That number, they'll put their name on it. And as a column or row or field, they'll be able to participate in a mystery event. So that's just a really cool way to do special events for the participants. It's also important to note that if replicated, even if the participant is not modeling positive behavior at that moment and during the special event when it happens, that they earn that reward and that they should still be able to participate in that as well. Now I want to talk about our community engagement and our capstone project options for our participants as well. So when talking about community engagement, it's important to remember that it's not punitive, but an opportunity for participants to learn and engage with their community and the world around them. So there are two components, again, to our community engagement program. The first are the community engagement electives. The electives allow the participants to choose various activities that each have an assigned point value, and then they're expected to reach 100 points for completion. So they can double dip. It really doesn't matter like what that looks like. Again, it's just those 100 points. So you see that they have a 20, 50, and 80 point option. So I'll kind of go over them a little bit so you guys can get some ideas of what that looks like. So for 20 points, the participants can choose 3 TED Talks for our pre-approved list and then complete a video response worksheet as well as a documentary. And those options are typically surrounding criminal justice, race equity, and just what their world looks like from a community criminal justice standpoint. And they also have the opportunity to attend an educational workshop and a worksheet that goes with that. For 50 points, they can lead a food drive for a local food bank and commit to gathering at least 100 cans, or design a poster for our program that showcases our 5 expectations and what it means to them, and then they do a presentation. That by far has been one of the coolest things that I've been able to see our participants show up to court with this really creative piece and just going in on like what they mean to them, and then like what they're struggling with. And you just see the sense of pride in something that they've put their work into, and then showing the judge and the prosecutor and our DA, like it's really empowering just to see them talk about that as well. And then we take that poster that I showed you earlier, we take that off, and then we put their poster. And so they really have something that is ingrained in our program that'll be there for as long as our program's around. It's really awesome. And then for 80 points, participants can complete a career pathway portfolio and a career exploration worksheet. This has been something that's really surprised me how many participants have completed to date. The participants are able to go and do a survey and find out what careers best fit their skills and their interests. And then we have them fill out 5 worksheets off of, a list of maybe 20 professions that they match up with, and like what does the job outlook look like, what education and certifications are required, what's the pay, what skills do you already have that match this. And it's been really cool. And then afterwards we connect them with people in the community that can give them that hands-on experience to get there or to just shadow. And I think it's really valuable. When I interned with LSJA, I talked to our board member who was a grant writer, and I was like, I really want to do this. And after that conversation, I was like, I don't want to do this. But I think it's really important for our participants to have that opportunity as well. They shouldn't have to wait till they're in college in an internship to learn what they like. And then our participants also can design a children's book about making good choices. We just allow them to be creative. We have a participant that's a rapper, and he's making a music video for us. And so that's just a super cool way to incorporate their creativity in that. And then they can work with the program staff to either plan a program event or a community event. So those are our electives. And again, they have to just make 100 points for that completion. And then our participants, once they are in phase 3, they start on their capstone projects. Their capstone projects give participants the opportunity to discover and explore their interests, to envision and realize ways in which their brilliance, their skills, and their creativity can impact their community, and then demonstrate that they can enact positive change. So right now I'm working with one of our participants to do a food drive, and when asking her, I want to back up and say this is a project that the participants, they designed, they lead, there's a proposal form, and all we really do is one, to make sure that they've kind of identified who it's targeted for, what the budget's going to look like, how it's going to affect their community, and we give them the resources to do it. And so we have a participant that's doing a food drive, and I asked her, so do you want, like, who do you want these supplies to go to? And she wasn't really sure at first, so I said, you know what, I'll give you a few days to kind of identify who you'd like it to go to. Think about what your life like, and if there's any correlation, how having such supplies that you're gathering could help you at that time. And so she came back and she was like, you know what? I'm in college right now. COVID's hard. I'm lucky enough that I have family and friends that I can rely on for food, but other college students aren't as lucky. I want this to go towards college students. And so that's what she's basing her capstone project for, and it's been really great. And as her peer support, like I was able to guide her through that, but it's also important as a mentor that you, in a way, protect them from other outside sources. So there are a lot of individuals that are like, well, she's in Georgetown, so this needs to go to Georgetown and be for Georgetown homeless. And, you know, I was there to help advocate for her and to help her speak her truth and advocate for herself to say, no, this is what I want to do. And, you know, we want to help them speak up. That's it that I have for you. Are there any questions? I know that was a lot.
So we wanted to kind of give you guys ideas of different ways that you all can really deepen your relationship, right? So I think the big takeaway from this is go in with a plan. And the more that you all as mentors can work together to develop an overall program that has different components, that has different incentives that can really deepen your program, the more effective that you will be. Because you'll kind of have a plan for how you're going to go, and thinking about an accountability tool or a PBIS incentive framework can really just get right into the heart of moving beyond just a supportive role, but really opening up the entire world for your girls, right? And so having a plan, thinking through these ways, and sharing these tools is meant to really spark your own creative juices, right? About how can you build these strengths and move forward. So I wanted to, do y'all have questions? Have we still got you? I know it's a Friday afternoon, y'all.
No questions. You guys are doing awesome. Very insightful.
And same for you. I mean, one of the things that impresses me about just the comments and questions that you've asked is that you either have experience or innate qualities that make you perfect for mentoring these folks. So it's really encouraging.
Alyssa, you should be able to talk now. For some reason, it had muted you. You may have to unmute. Alyssa, did you have something? Are you here still?
Feel free to type if you can't, for some reason. Well, so I think if there aren't any questions, guys, feel free. Oh no, Alyssa says now she can't hear. Let's give her a second let's see if we can. I see a hand up.
Victoria. I have a question. I guess as you all were talking, and I haven't really, it never came to mind, but I need to know this to make sure I don't have a conflict of interest. The kids, the participants, are they actually, what facility are they actually from a facility? Because I work at Travis County Juvenile Probation. I just want to make sure I'm not in a conflict of interest. So they're not, okay.
Maria, I think you guys did
Victoria, I can give you more information on that since you are affiliated with the probation. I know there are 2 to 3 girls that have been justice involved, but I'll send you an email directly and let you know if any names are familiar to you, just to make sure you're not paired with someone if there is a conflict.
Okay, I just was thinking about that as y'all was talking. I never got a chance to ask, and I was like, I don't want to, do anything.
That's really good information for us, as well as we do continue to grow the program, that we might have to have that question on the application form. So thank you so much for that feedback. I'll take note of that as well.
I hope not,
okay,
because
thank
it
you.
would sure be a shame to lose you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but I was thinking maybe I might, because I'm a counselor, I might have done their assessment or anything like that, and if they're on probation, I know I can't do this.
Right.
They're
We can
within our
definitely
system.
still keep you involved, but just pair you with someone else that may not be justice involved if that's the case. But I'll share their information with you on Monday once I go over the list and pull everyone's information. And Sunday, you'll get the opportunity to meet everyone too.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Still lost Alyssa?
And I'm going to share.
No, I'm back.
Oh, good.
I did have a question about the documentaries and the TED Talks. So we have access to those pre-approved lists.
Yeah, we can certainly share what we have. Angels, it's already online, isn't it? Don't we have most of that already up there?
Yeah, so on our website, all of that information is there. I'll share a screen that has our contact information. And then our website is LoneStarJusticeAlliance.org. And so you can find all that information there. We try and have just the information readily accessed for our participants at all times.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
One of the things I want to just give a props up to Angel, because as you can imagine, moving into a COVID world, I don't know if you guys are meeting in person or how you're working, but Angel has done a fantastic job of coming up for community activities that you can do with your participants or your mentees, even in a virtual setting. So that's why like the TED Talks and stuff can be really great, because you can do sort of a, shared webinar experience or Zoom call together where you watch something together and then you talk and you still have this virtual shared experience. And so Angel has been just exceptionally brilliant in flipping our program to be very virtual friendly. And so please take advantage of her genius and steal from any of that you want to utilize with your own participant if you want to create a virtual environment and start to build that relationship virtually. I have to say she is quite exceptional in her ability to come up with like really creative ways to engage. And one of the things that we offered to y'all was that, Angel was so generous in offering to be kind of a resource for you if you need to think through ways that you might be able to engage your mentee and ways that you might be able to do it virtually or in person. These are just ways that we've found that are really great for engaging people deeper into the program.
And even if you guys don't use a point system model, especially so our worksheets for the documentaries are definitely more targeted for each documentary that's on that list. But the TED Talk worksheets are very general. They can go with any TED Talk. So, if you have a mentee that's just sitting at home bored, I know it's summer, don't know what the school year is going to look like, so they may have some more free time. Find out what they're interested in, find a TED Talk, and have them fill out that worksheet, I think it could be a great time filler. And also, they can learn. There are just TED Talks about literally anything. And I like TED Talks. I think it's a great opportunity for your participants to learn. And then all of our phone number, our office address, and all of our emails are here as well. So please don't hesitate to send us an email if you have any questions. I'll also be sending out a post survey, just kind of gauging how this training went with you all. So if you all don't mind filling that out for me, I would greatly appreciate it.
Yes. And can I say something? This is Maria. I just want to say, Lone Star Justice Alliance, you guys are amazing and have been supportive from the beginning of this project, and your willingness to help us grow and develop the Travis County Girl Squad and the Innocence Initiative has been amazing. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of Measure, Hearts to Heal, and the Travis County Girl Squad. Thank you all again so much. This was wonderful, and we appreciate your partnership on this project.
Perfect. Absolutely. We love you guys. I want to make one more offer to y'all, which is I am a lawyer. So in the event that one of your girls has a need for immediate legal assistance, I am offering you guys, you have my phone number, and I'll chat you my cell phone number. Maria can distribute it. I can't represent everybody, but give me a call if you guys have any questions that are immediate legal questions, because those might come up. I basically work 24/7. And so you can call me anytime if you have an emergency and you need to just find out from a lawyer, what do I do? She's called me, anything that's happening, and I can at least give you some on the spot guidance of what to do. So please utilize me as a resource in that way. I hate finding out afterwards that a 10-year-old's been arrested, or, because somebody didn't know how to walk them through a scary situation. So please do that. And then the last thing that I want to sort of emphasize, one of the reasons when we were talking to Mimi and Maria about doing this, I said, the worst thing that can happen is you all come in as mentors and identify really challenging behavior, and it gets reported to the police and draws people deeper into the system. And so we want to be your resource, that if you get into a situation that feels bigger than you can handle, and you're searching for something to do, please call us before you, unless it's an emergency situation, please call us if you just want resources and access to more partnerships, because we believe deeply that community can often be there for these girls in a more effective way than any justice system involvement can be. And so we are here to help. We are here to support you, and anything we can do to connect you with resources that you see yourself needing, count on us to be there for you, because we want to stop these movements deeper into justice system. We're here. All right. Well, I think we'll give you 30 minutes of your life back.
It was nice talking to you all, and I can't wait to hear all the great things you all do.
I do have another kind of concern or a question, really. It's about having to deal with parents, or like, if there's been any. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just with do you have to deal with the parents a lot? And if there's been, some trouble in the past about, just some conflict of what you're telling the girls compared to what the parents or what they think?
Yeah, so we punted on that hard question. You're very astute. Maria, are you guys going to do any sort of training on reporting and when you might report?
Yeah, so that was kind of a small overview in the confidentiality training that they did with Dr. Ebony, who is a licensed psychologist. And then we're also going to have a mixer on this Sunday, which is a virtual mixer. The mentees, their parent and guardian will be attending as well. And so we'll have those uncomfortable conversations as well, and then kind of go over what we have, like we're liable to report and what we have to bring up. So we will discuss more of that at the mixer as well.
Okay. And my personal advice, just from experience, is a lot of times when you get involved in somebody's life, you get involved in the entire family's life. I know in our experience, we are mentors and mentees to pretty much everybody, girlfriends. We have one participant whose girlfriend comes to every single one of our life skills classes and has attended almost every court, and she is just an equal part of our program as he is. We have parents who we work with to put into places, and we sort of take a holistic approach of a lot of our parents show up with trauma too. And so we try to meet them where they're at, and assume that if they've gotten their kid far enough to be in y'all's program, they're probably doing something right, and they may just not have the tools to do everything right. And so, I think come with all the lessons on the trauma informed and incentivizing positive behavior works with parents too.
Yeah, and sorry, Elizabeth.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say too, I will just add one thing. When I interviewed the girls, I also interviewed with their parent or guardian as well. And pretty much the 10 participants that we had, someone in the household that was on that interviewing call was very proactive on knowing that their girl needs a mentor, knowing that they've maybe struggled in the past and know that they can't fully support them, but they were very supportive of saying, what do I need to do to make sure her she has program success essentially. And so that was one of the things we were kind of concerned about, if we were going to run into some parents or guardians that were giving us the cold shoulder, or really like, are you sure you're not involved with the justice system and you're going to report all these things back to their caseworkers or whatnot. And I really broke it down to that we want that mentor-mentee relationship until, like you said, we have to report something that might be harmful to the girl, someone at home, or, you know, all the different barriers that we marked out. So I did want to say that as well, that the parent and guardians were very willing to participate and very, just a delight. I was extremely impressed with the girls and their parent and guardians. And Elizabeth, I'll shoot you the link as well, and Angel and Amy, to the mixer on Sunday if you kind of just wanted to pop in and, you know, just get opportunity to meet some of the participants. I also think that is important. I didn't think about that previously, but you guys have been very vocal in this project with us, and I think it's always good to see kind of some of the behind the scenes things that are taking place, and really put faces to who our allies are, especially in the justice system, when girls may have been involved and think like, oh gosh, everybody's terrible, or I haven't had such a great experience. We have 3 wonderful women right here on this webinar that support and uplift Black girls. And I think that's important for them to see as well, that the justice system, lawyers and attorneys and public defenders aren't big bad wolves all the time. So I will make sure to send that link to you all.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
My participants hate police, but they hate defense lawyers almost as much. So I start with a deficit with most of my kiddos, being like, yes, I'm white. And 2, I'm a defense lawyer, like 2 huge X's across me when I start working with my kiddos.
I'm sorry, and in reference to CPS, prior CPS employee as well, this is Victoria, but I was trying to see, when you say report, if a child, I know sometimes it's never reported, a child feels comfortable reporting to one person that they're trustworthy to. If a child reports some type of abuse or anything or prior thing, I know me, I have to be duty to warn. The fact that I am partially licensed on one license, I do have to report. So do I report, or how do y'all, because I know y'all saying y'all want to keep people at the system, but if a child reports to me that they are have experienced some type of abuse, sexual or something I experienced that a lot currently in my field now that has never been spoken, child feels comfortable telling me of someone in the family sexual abuse and so forth like that. So how do y'all kind of want to, how does that work out? Or
yeah, Victoria, I would say what I would like to do, just because you are in a very unique niche for our mentors, which is great. I love this clinical side or working in the system as well. I would like to have you meet with Dr. Ebony, Mimi, and myself, just so we can kind of wash some of those things out. I kind of have an answer for it, but I just want to talk with all of the ladies involved on that more consulting based side to make sure that we lead you in the right direction as well, and are considerate that you do have licensure that needs to uphold a certain standard as well. So I will follow up with you specifically. One, I need to give you that list of mentees just to make sure there's no conflict of interest, and then also letting us know too what you absolutely have to report as well is important.
okay. All
So
right,
you'll get an email from me for sure.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
This is like the hardest thing in the work that we do is balancing. So I want to really honor Victoria for that question, because it's a really hard thing and we struggle. So it's funny, people think I'm a mandatory reporter as a lawyer. I'm actually not. A lot of times I'm actually forbidden by law from reporting, except for in one instance, which we take really seriously at LSJA, which is that if our client, especially one of our children, is in the place of harm, we always report. Our threshold is public safety, not neglect. And so we have a tendency, unless it is a severe case of neglect, we will work with people because they're in our program. Like that's step 1. That's probably more than they're ever going to get from CPS. But if there's a personal safety issue, even though we actually, because people work typically for me and therefore my licensure does not require reporting, we still take an approach of like safety. And I think that it is an increasingly difficult challenge for those who work in this field, given some of the difficulties that can arise with reporting and reporting families and bringing them into the system. So I just want to honor that that's a really difficult question, and that those are challenges that everybody sort of has to address. And it's amazing, and of course to be expected, Maria, that y'all have already thought through that as well. So it's a tough call. And feel free to report to somebody and then still have them call me. So that's the other thing. That's why I give you my number. If someone has to be reported because it's a public safety issue, they can still call me and I will be there no matter what. So for your 10 kids, you guys are all going to get a little extra bump. So.
This is great. And this is our first year launching the Travis County Girl Squad literally right now and switching the whole model from what it was going to be back in March, April launch to now. And so we know that there are going to be growing pains and hiccups that we're learning along the way. And so we really do appreciate all of that insight. Elizabeth knows us. We like transparency and we all have tough skin on the team. So this is for the mentors, the leadership team, partners, and everything. If there is something that you have feedback on or something that you're like, oh, I don't know if I really understood that, or if you straight out didn't like something, we'd like to know that information so that we can go back to our convening session and replan, what the next cohort will look like to even improve on it. So thank you all for that as well. And keep asking questions. We love them. That's how we can vet things out as well.
The truth is, y'all are going to be great. One of you guys is going to get an angel, right? Like, I mean, that's what I always think about, right? Like, Angel is sitting there waiting for one person to come in and listen to her, right? And then, I mean, she's going to be governor someday, and y'all will come back and be like, remember that time Governor Carol taught us about positive behavioral interventions and supports? Like, this is, I promise you, 10 years from now, maybe not 10, maybe 20, she'll be governor. We'll go back and do it. So it's going to be so awesome. You're going to get to, y'all are going to get to mentor somebody who's going to turn out to be as fabulous as she is and change the world, right? Like, that's the coolest thing. So.
Yes, and these girls are amazing. I must say that myself, we did get 60 plus applications, and for me to vet them down to 10 was heartbreaking. But I have found a couple other organizations that are just doing some quick virtual workshops or a mixer here and there. And so I'm going to still facilitate those opportunities to the girls to let them know we're still thinking about them, because it's always hard when you get rejected. For adults, it's tough, and kids are resilient in different ways that we don't understand. But we're still keeping them in mind for other projects and things like that too. So just to let you guys know that as well.
It's amazing. Well, y'all are going to do amazing work. You've got our information. Call anytime at all.
Take care.
Go forth and change the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Y'all have a good evening.
All right. Bye.